From theCUBE studios in Palo Alto and Boston, connecting with thought leaders all around the world, this is a CUBE Conversation.
One of the companies that thrived in the last decade was Pure Storage. They succeeded in a large part by bringing cloud-like principles to on-premises installations. The company this month is celebrating its 11th anniversary, and as we enter the next era of cloud, companies like Pure are making moves to leverage next generation cloud build-outs, which will span on-prem, multiple public clouds, and of course the distributed edge. Welcome to this special presentation of theCUBE on Cloud, and with me is Charlie Giancarlo, who is the CEO of Pure Storage. Welcome, sir, good to see you.
Hi, Dave, so good to be with you again, and thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. Charlie, Pure, you set out more than a decade ago and you were trying to change the storage business. You did in many ways. And yeah, you rode the flash economics curve and you stole a lot of share from big companies like EMC, their large install base of legacy spinning disk systems. But I've argued many times that the industry is littered with companies that tried to leverage the flash economics. What really set Pure apart was the cloud-like simplicity that it brought to market at scale. So 11 years on, how do you see it?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, we just celebrated our 11th anniversary. And for the first 10 years, we really did set out to change the storage industry, as you said, and perhaps the vehicle of that was flash. But really, we changed the entire set of expectations that customers had for what a storage array looked like on-prem. And what we did was we made it simple. That is, instead of having a 2-week course and 1,000 pages of manuals, we could fit all of our all of the setup and operating instructions on a single sheet of paper. It worked like an iPhone. You didn't really need to be trained to use it because it really just worked out of the box. We reset expectations on reliability, 10 times more reliable than anybody else. And we reset expectations on how these things were managed, made it managed via the cloud, and the ability to provide analytics that allowed customers and allowed us to stay ahead of any problems that might occur in their environment. Well, we looked at what we wanted to do in our second decade, and we created this vision that basically said, storage should not be something that customers need to work on every single day. It really should be something that developers can just call upon by declarations in their code. Think of it as storage as code. That's what the cloud did when you're on the cloud. We're doing exactly the same thing on-prem. Storage and storage management, data management as code. Now developers could just subscribe to the type of characteristics that they want in their data. That is, how resilient, how responsive, how fast, and how much. They could put it as code in their applications or in the orchestration environment and have it be delivered automatically within microseconds. So it's a very compelling vision, one that we and our customers that we're working with are very excited about.
Well, that is a compelling vision because there's this cloud divide, which is frankly larger than many in the vendor community would acknowledge. And what I mean by that is the experience on-prem is still not what it needs to be for a lot of companies, or vice versa with regard to their cloud strategy. That includes pricing models, the true cloud dynamic. But you mentioned, essentially storage as code, Pure as code. I think very few infrastructure companies have figured this out. I would say the one that sort of stands out in my mind is Cisco with DevNet, if you're familiar with that. They've done a really good job there. And it sounds like with your recent acquisition of Portworx, you're kind of rethinking that model and really headed toward a similar infrastructure as code model, which really is cloud.
That's right. The beautiful thing about Portworx is that now we can do the same thing for cloud native applications that are container based. But what Portworx brought, which dovetailed beautifully with Pure, is that they brought both an SDS layer, a software defined layer for containers that allowed developers to get up and running very quickly. They even have a freemium product that allows them to get up and very quickly with a full set of high reliability and high resiliency storage services for their container environment. But they also brought a Kubernetes layer. It operates both on-prem and in the cloud that allows for data services to take place. And combined with the the same capability that we've been building for traditional applications. Now customers will have a Kubernetes-based orchestration layer that allows developers, as I said, to really define what type of services, data storage services that they want in their code and have it be delivered.
Well, that's kind of the other divide that I wanted to talk about, which is really the types of work being done traditionally on-prem versus in the cloud. You hear that term cloud native, you've used it. How do you see that playing out? Do you expect developers in large incumbent organizations, within your install base or maybe even your competitors' install base to start developing apps on-prem that are so-called cloud native, or is that going to go into the public cloud? And so how do you see that shaking out?
Right. What we think has excited so many people about the cloud is not the destination, but the way it's structured. Right. The cloud is structured such that developers can define what type of assets they want, be it compute, storage, data management, even networking. They can define that in code and it gets delivered. If the same set of capabilities were available on-prem, now IT organizations get to decide based on economics, based on regulation, based on the whatever compliance issues that they have with their regulatory body or issues around security. They can decide where they want to place their data in their compute because it still works the same way as it does in the cloud. That is, their developers can define again, what type of services they need in their code and have it be delivered. And now it can be delivered regardless of what cloud it goes on. And then finally, customers don't necessarily want to be captive to a single cloud, hyperscaler cloud environment. They want to be able to, maybe not every day, but when necessary, move workloads from one cloud to another. What the combination of Pure and Portworx delivers is a capability that is portable. It's portable across clouds, both on-prem and public clouds.
So, okay, so I buy that, but I want to push you on one item, which is there are constraints on-prem just in terms of your ability to go infinite, essentially dial up, dial down. You've got ways around it. You can put in capacity, put in some kind of guaranteed headroom. That is the one constraint. But is your premise that constraint is so minor, it's not going to stop on-prem from developing those apps in the way that you just described? I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're asked. Many apps, well, first of all, we Pure take responsibility for our customers when we deliver Pure as a service for that rubber banding, for that scaling. So if our customers require that type of scaling, we're able with our what we call Meta, which is our artificial intelligence that monitors our customers' environment. We're able to predict when they'll need more capacity or more performance, and we deliver that. But secondly, there are many, many applications that customers run that really have a much smaller necessity for that type of rubber banding. And when applications are very consistent, then typically they run much more efficiently on-prem.
Now, so I'm going to stay on this theme of divides. So at the same time as we have companies like Pure moving deeper into the cloud, you've got the hyperscalers moving to hybrid and bringing on-prem, and which is interesting. Right. Because generally, and I love your take on this, they're generally not good at supporting and servicing remote locations at scale with a consistent homogeneous model.
Yes.
So what's your take on that?
Well, it's an interesting new development. We actually were certified recently in the Amazon AWS Outposts implementation of that our arrays, because typically they require, in some cases, high performance, and so we're able to deliver that. But I think the way to think about Outposts is that it allows cloud native environments to run on-prem, but not so much, but it's not designed specifically for traditional applications to run either in the cloud or on-prem. We deliver both, and we can make that easily accessible to our customers.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I saw that announcement. You guys are always like to be first at things, and that was another first. But it reminded me to a certain extent of the Azure model, Azure stack, where the company's partnering now with on-prem experts like you and potentially others. Did Azure get it right?
Well, I think that, as the English say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and it's still very early in that environment to see, whether customers are going to strongly embrace the edge type model that the hyperscalers are providing. But Microsoft's a very powerful entity, and certainly very enterprise aware. We're in beta right now on Azure with our Cloud Block Store product. They and we are both very excited about what we're seeing. We've gotten a number of large customers who have committed to move to Azure and are on Pure today. And they have bought Pure as a service because it provides them a unified subscription to both environments. And they're very excited about us helping them, and Azure is excited as well, about us helping them to be able to enable their enterprise and traditional workloads to operate in both environments.
Okay, I'm going to stick with this divides theme. So another one is pricing and models of pricing. We're seeing many more as a service offerings come out. HPE has made a big deal about GreenLake. You guys early on had some innovative pricing models. And I've always thought, Charlie, and again, I would love to get your take on this. You and I always have some great conversations about the broader industry, not just about narrow Pure. I look at the SaaS vendors and say, okay, let's learn about how they're pricing. And I'm sometimes not a fan of their pricing. As you look at how Salesforce prices, or Workday, or ServiceNow, and even Pure Storage, to say, okay, you got to sign up for a term, and if you get a better deal if you go 2 years. And now we've seen with Snowflake, which of course I consider you guys part of the Silicon Valley Mafia, with Dietz and Speiser and Slootman and all those guys. We're seeing Snowflake with the consumption pricing model. I wonder if you could talk generally about pricing, cloud pricing, and strategies that you see as effective there.
Right. Well, we offer our product in two different ways. One is traditional CapEx, buy the product and the customer depreciates it. The other way, as you mentioned, is Pure as a service, which is a purely as a service pricing model. The customer can actually start out, without a term. But of course, if they do sign up to a minimum for a period of time, then the overall licensing fee comes down. But we only charge for what they consume. This is very different than most other models that are out there for on-prem. Most other models that are out there for on-prem don't charge for what you consume, but rather charge for what you reserve. That is to say, well, I might be at a certain level, a year or two from now. You have to reserve that entire level, and then you are paying for that level. In our case, we only charge the customer for what they actually utilize. And as it goes up or down over time, we take care of that for them. Secondly, we manage the product. That's another difference here. When you go to as a service, whether it's Snowflake or ServiceNow or one of the hyperscalers, you don't really know what hardware they're on, because at the end of the day, all of this stuff does run on hardware. You don't know if they upgrade it, downgrade it, whether they move it, when you are asleep at night, because the service just keeps going. That is what they commit to you, is that the service keeps going, not that you have a piece of hardware with a name on it. And that's what we do with our customers, and that's unique among all of the other vendors. That is to say that the customer gets an SLA, they get a service level agreement from us. We may upgrade, downgrade that product, move data, but we're the only ones that can deliver non-disruptive upgrades and downgrades. Our competitors can't. So that means that with all of the others, the customer has a product with a name on it. In our case, the customer just subscribes to a service that we manage. So this takes a huge burden off of them, not just from the standpoint of the commercial pricing and so forth, but also from the standpoint of administration, because we do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. Another kind of component of this is how you measure churn. And you saw with ServiceNow, they sort of came up with this new metric, which really measured, average contract value and renewal rates, which are always very, very high. And I thought it was quite interesting the way Scarpelli did that. And I don't know if you've seen what he's done now at Snowflake, with basically taking a 2-year stream, and then looking at 1 year, and then looking at the renewals, and you see the numbers on the S1 is like 158%. Now that's going to come down over time, but they have to do that because it's consumption based. There's no term to go on.
Right.
So how do you look at that? Have you sort of, tuned those
it's
metrics
very,
internally?
first of all, as you may know, I was on the ServiceNow board with Frank and with Mike. So I don't know the specific thing that Michael just did at Snowflake, but I know how he operates.
Yeah.
We a year ago, this is not a number that we regularly promote, but a year ago we did identify a similar number to what you're talking about, net retention ratio, right? And our net retention ratio was 142, which is among the highest in any of the SaaS environments. So we have similar ratios, despite the fact that we tend to be more of an on-prem player currently than we are in the cloud. But we have similar retention ratios, and of course, we have a net promoter score of 82, which I know because we've talked about it before, but which is unprecedented in the industry, top 1% of all companies worldwide.
Yeah, that's awesome, and thank you again for mentioning that. But I think those metrics to me are really important, especially to help people understand when you're in sort of a transition to new pricing models. I'm sure it's important to communicate to the street as well as people. You see this in companies. You saw it with a company like Tableau, Adobe, very successfully transitioned. You're seeing Splunk go through this now, and Oracle obviously is the best example. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is education to the street, and having those metrics I think is really important.
That's right, and transparency, right? And it's hard because it's not just a simple translation between what had been, CapEx model before and now more of an OpEx and subscription model. It's not a one-for-one, so you have to provide the street a lot of different metrics to make them feel comfortable with the transition. So
I always like you to get your sort of vision on the industry. You've got a very good perspective on a lot of different parts of the business, but particularly networking with your experience there. What's your vision for the next decade of cloud? I'm interested in your thoughts, particularly on how the network is changing, not specific wonky networking stuff, but the work from home permanence. Somebody said to me the other day, we're moving from an age of hyper-converged infrastructure to hyper-distributed infrastructure. That was sort of an interesting little catchphrase. How do you see it?
Yep. No, actually, I very much believe in that last item you mentioned. I believe we're going from hyper-converged to hyperscale. You can think of hyper-converged as everything all in one box, and while that sounds good, it means that the things are stuck in the box. If you think about the cloud, it's hyper-disassociated, right? Everything is separate. The way I think of the future is really, and I'll go back to this phrase, infrastructure as code, right? In other words, we really, in the future, you may not even have a computer sitting on your desk anymore, just a monitor, that in order for you to see, and a way for you to interact. But the processing power may exist on a private cloud or a public cloud or in a SaaS provider. But the point is, from a user's point of view, and even from a developer's point of view, we make the infrastructure disappear. It manages itself, it takes care of itself, it upgrades itself, and by upgrading itself, there are still people involved. But the majority of the public, certainly consumers, but also developers now, they're able to obtain the type of capabilities they need simply with the code that they write.
What role are you going to play? I said it was my last question, I lied, just thought of another one. What role do you see Pure playing, and maybe this is aspirational, but in terms of training sort of that new breed of developer? I come back to Cisco. What they've done brilliantly is they've taken their base of CCIEs and they said, okay, we're going to teach how to code in Python so you can code Cisco infrastructure. It'd be brilliant. And of course they have a lot of legacy and huge install base of network engineers. Do you see Pure playing a role there? I mean, could you go after that huge base of, for instance, EMC storage admins who are good at provisioning LUNs, which is a dead end, and saying, hey guys, we're going to teach you how to code infrastructure. What do you think there?
I actually joined Pure because I saw a similar opportunity to what I saw in networking 30 years ago. I'm embarrassed to say that I was there during that period of time. And I was there during those days of Cisco, and if you think about it, there were no internet engineers at that time. There were no people who managed networks. There were people that managed voice systems. There were people that managed IBM SNA. There were people that managed all sorts of other capabilities. And we had this crazy early idea that everything was going to move to the internet. Everything was going to move to internet protocol. And so we had to develop expertise for being able to build and manage the internet and private networks as well. And as similar to what I've been talking about with private data centers and the public cloud, we had to deal with private networks and the public internet, right, all together. And of course, they both still exist. So yes, I believe that at Pure, what I came into is a storage industry that was still stuck, in an environment like this. Some of your older viewers will remember this. These are an external hard drive. It's no different than a storage array and a fiber channel connection. It gets stuck. Your children, my children don't use these anymore. They use Dropbox, they use Box, they use, a OneDrive and so forth, because they just go to the cloud. They don't have to worry about buying it, about sizing it, about moving it. And that's where storage is going. Storage is going to a cloud-like environment where applications just call for what they need, and they get it. And the levels of resiliency and cost and performance, again, is all determined by what the developer decides, is code. So where we're going is, you might think of this as making storage disappear. And it's all going to be about data management and providing the tools, to the storage admins to define that, both public and private, and to the developers to be able to utilize it through a set of APIs.
It's a great vision, Charlie. I could talk to you all day. I remember when TCP/IP was this old, reliable, stodgy kind of protocol, and now it runs the internet. But Charlie, Giancarlo, thanks so much for coming on theCUBE and participating in this program. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you, Dave. A pleasure seeing you again.
All right, and thank you for watching, everybody. Keep it right there. We'll be back with our next guest right after this short break. You're watching theCUBE.